Well, they're not wrong. So, in first things first, they talked about Zach Taylor. And obviously, we talked about yesterday. T. Higgins came out and said, he doesn't like narratives. He doesn't like all the narratives. Get out to a hot start, right? He doesn't like all that stuff. He says, go out there and play. It's 3 courses of the game: offense, defense, special teams. You got to finish the games, right? And that's kind of the mindset that was from him yesterday. Well, they called out Zach Taylor, and this was also from yesterday. And it's actually calling him out about, if you don't like the narrative, then change the narrative. But the problem is they haven't changed the narrative. And they pointed out the fact that under Zach Taylor, we're 1-11 in the first 2 weeks of the seasons. Since Zach Taylor's taken over in 2019, we are 1-11 in the first 2 weeks.
Coach, you like that?
No.
You didn't?
Go out and look. I like the idea of going out and executing it on a team, and I don't like the idea that you're going to disregard the narrative. If you don't like the narrative, then change the narrative. But the problem is they haven't changed the narrative, and we talk about it every year. And every year at the end of the year, it becomes the thing that's the reason that they didn't go to the playoffs. And even when you looked at right at the start of the offseason, they were talking about the fact that they have to fix this slow start problem. They were talking about it in February, and at least they're trying to address it with playing guys in the preseason, doing some different things. They talked about changing some things in OTAs, changing some things in training camp, which to me, I don't know quite how we've gotten to this point. If we can just bring up the stat, this is through the first 2 games over 6 years.
That's correct.
That's Zach Taylor's record. He's 1-11 through 6 years, and you think at year 2 you're like, okay, we're gonna have to do something a little bit differently than we did before. Year 4, it's like, we might want to address this, and now here we are, and people may be frustrated with what's being said, but it's what's keeping you from the opportunity with a franchise quarterback and all the money that's been put into these offensive players to compete for something that Cincinnati, this window's not going to last forever.
And again, like I said, they're not wrong. If you don't want that to be the narrative, if you want to be seen as a better coach and not a coach on the hot seat and not a coach who potentially could get fired soon, you need to change a narrative yourself. You need to find ways as a coach to have your team ready to go and be able to play week 1 and week 2. And so far throughout the seasons, for whatever reason, whatever the reason is at this point, we haven't been able to. So that narrative's not going to change until we change it ourselves. And again, like I said, they're not wrong. But at the end of the day, this year, Zach has trying to change the narrative yet again. He made it so that we're not going to do any joint practices. We have 0 joint team practices this year. We're the only team in the league doing this. And the reason why is because we're trying to start off faster. But you know what also really starts off faster and changes the narrative? Signing Trey Hendrickson. Not having these distractions going into the season. It's always a thing. It's always a distraction. Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, you name it, every single year. You want to stop the narrative? Stop having distractions going into preseason. Stop having distractions going into the season. And I know Zach has changed when it comes to, playing his starters in the preseason. He's now going to play his starters in the preseason. We saw it week 1. They put a whole entire quarter. Honestly, they probably played more week 1 than they did for the first 4 years of Zach Taylor's career. But again, not having these distractions going into the season, that's also going to help change the narrative. That's also going to help fix the 1-11 problem. But I don't know why, refusing to get this contract done with Trey. They took a while for the Shamar Stewart situation, and now the Trey situation is also taking a very long time. But again, it is what it is. It's just kind of like, it's to a point where we just grown accustomed to this whole perspective of, we're going to start off the season slow. And then again, this year we can't afford to. But we'll see. We'll see, because at this point, I feel like we're all just used to it. We're all just used to week 1, week 2. It's going to be tough. It's going to be the toughest part ever. And then you also go in that time, then there's also injuries potentially from training camp or preseason you're dealing with. Players look rusty. Players don't look like they're 100% ready to go. These are all things that, to a certain degree, is the coach's problem. The coaches need to get their team ready. Obviously, the player needs to get themselves ready as well. It's not all on the coaches. It's also the players. But as a coach, you need to make sure your team is ready. And Zach has not done a good job over his career. So it is what it is. But again, them calling him out, I'm not surprising. Not surprising at all that they called him out. Because at this point, it's one of those things where it's like you call him out, but it's not like that's going to do anything at this point. Because, it has to be something that gets, seen as inside the organization as a huge problem. Yeah. People may be frustrated on what being said, but it's what's keeping you from the opportunity with a franchise quarterback, and all the money has been put between these offensive players to compete for that Cincinnati. This window is not going to last forever. I disagree. I disagree with that greatly. I know a lot of people say that, but I think the window will be open as long as Joe Burrow's our quarterback. Joe Burrow will keep that Super Bowl window open no matter who our coach is and no matter what our team looks like. As long as Joe Shiesty is there, we're going to have a Super Bowl window. He also says he's 1-11 through 6 years, and you think year 2 you'd be like, okay, we're going to have to do something a bit differently than we did before. Year 4, it's like, okay, we might need to address this. Now we are. Yeah. Because I think there's, again, we fired Lou Anarumo. We got rid of a lot of positional coaches. At some point, you keep, getting rid of coaches. There's only so many coaches you can get rid of, right? Before the head coach becomes the problem. A lot of times, you get through a list of coaches you fire, and eventually you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's quarterback. Maybe it's the GM. Maybe it's the head coach. And you can only blame so many people before it becomes pretty obvious, and then you have to cut the coach. So I think Zach is seeing the writing on the wall, and he figured it out very quickly. He needs to change something or else he's going to be out of a job. Tell me down below your thoughts and opinions. I'll see you guys next one.